Chosen ones, these signs show you're tuned to a dark dimensional path. There's a path that few speak about, a path that doesn't flaunt itself with light and love, but rather wraps itself in mystery, silence, and subtle seduction. And many, yes, many of us, walk this path without even knowing. We think we are chosen, and perhaps we are, but being chosen doesn't always mean you are chosen by the light. Sometimes the call comes from the shadows. And the terrifying part? It often feels just like divine guidance. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to awaken something ancient that's sleeping within you. You've felt it, haven't you? That strange pull toward things others don't understand. The dreams that don't feel like dreams. The moments when the world goes quiet and it's like something invisible is watching you, not with malice, but with interest. You've always felt different. Not better, not worse, just different. And maybe you tried to fit in, tried to suppress it, but the truth never sleeps. And if you're watching this, it means your truth is ready to break free.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
We need to talk about the chosen ones, not the glorified superhero version, but the real ones, the ones who are marked before birth, the ones who feel like outcasts in this world but deeply connected to something beyond it. If you've always felt like you don't belong, if people are drawn to you but also fear you, if you see through lies effortlessly and sometimes even feel others' emotions without words, you might be one. But, and here's where we go deeper, that doesn't mean you're walking the right path. See, every gift is a double-edged sword. Every spiritual perception, every psychic sensitivity, every dream that shows you the future, it can be used by the light or it can be hijacked by the dark. And that's where so many chosen ones get trapped. They think because they're gifted, they're protected. But what if your gift is a beacon and what it's attracting isn't all benevolent? Ask yourself honestly, when was the last time your spiritual journey made you feel truly free, not just hyped up on new age dopamine, but deeply, soulfully free? Or are you constantly anxious, always seeking more, feeling like something's just not right in your energy? That's the first sign. The dark path doesn't show up as evil, it shows up as addiction to spirituality. Always chasing, never arriving. You keep buying crystals, reading cards, burning sage, watching endless videos, but your soul still feels empty. Why? Because the dark dimension doesn't need to possess you in the Hollywood sense. It just needs you to stay distracted. It needs you to keep circling like a moth around a flame. And it uses your pain, your loneliness, your need to feel special as fuel. That's how it tunes you to its frequency, through emotional resonance, not English, not Latin, but emotion. Have you noticed how some of your most vivid spiritual experiences came during your darkest times? Breakups, loss, depression, isolation. That's not a coincidence. Those moments tear down your ego, yes, but they also open your field. And when your field is open, anything can step in, light or dark. So the question becomes, are you discerning what's coming through, or are you just accepting anything that feels powerful? Let me ask you something deeper. Have you ever felt guided, but then things started falling apart? You thought, Spirit told you to quit that job, leave that person, move to that city, and maybe it felt right at first. But then everything crumbled. You were left confused, broke, isolated, and still you told yourself, this is the dark night of the soul, it's just a test. But what if it wasn't a test? What if it was a trap? The dark path mimics the light. It mirrors it so closely that even the wise can be fooled. It speaks in visions, numbers, synchronicities. It gives you dreams. It makes you feel important, chosen. But the fruit of its guidance is always the same: confusion, obsession, isolation, and a kind of spiritual pride that whispers, "You're more awakened than others." That pride is subtle but deadly, because it separates you. It feeds the ego in spiritual clothing. You see, true light doesn't isolate you, it integrates you. It doesn't make you feel superior, it makes you feel connected. It doesn't demand blind faith, it invites deep discernment. So if your path has led you to cut everyone off, to trust only your guides, to feel like no one else gets you, pause. Just pause. Because you might be tuned to a dimension that feeds off your disconnection. And this is where things get real. Because I've been there, I've seen it. I've walked that lonely road thinking I was ascending, only to realize I was spiraling. I was meditating for hours, fasting, isolating, seeking, and yet my mind was chaotic, my body was weak, my emotions were numb. That wasn't enlightenment. That was entrapment. A spiritual matrix wearing a false halo. So what can you do? First, you must become radically honest with yourself. Strip away all the beliefs you've borrowed, all the teachings, videos, books, put them aside. What remains? Who are you without the labels of empath, starseed, lightworker? Just you, naked soul. And from that place, ask yourself, what am I actually aligning to? What is the emotional signature of the energies I commune with? That's the real test. Not what they say, but how they make you feel consistently. Do you feel empowered or dependent? Do you feel peace or paranoia? Do you feel grounded in your body or always trying to escape it? The answers are there, and they don't lie. You are powerful beyond words. But power without awareness is dangerous. And that's what dark dimensions want. They want powerful souls who are ungrounded, who are seeking, who are desperate to feel chosen. Because desperation creates openings, and darkness doesn't need to possess you. It just needs to whisper subtly until you start mistaking your own inner voice for its suggestion. So I ask you now, not as a guru, not as Mr. Beast, but as someone who's walked both paths, what are you truly tuned to? If you're ready, let's go deeper. The whispering shadows. When spiritual gifts attract the wrong energies. There's something most people won't tell you about having spiritual gifts, especially when you're labeled a chosen one. They make it sound like a divine appointment, a glorious destiny filled with miracles and light. But what they don't talk about is the price, the shadow that follows every gift, the trap door beneath every vision, the parasitic energies that lurk in spaces most people will never see, waiting for you to open the door with good intentions and no discernment. Because here's the truth. Not all that glitters is sacred, and not every voice you hear in meditation is your spirit guide. You have to understand, your sensitivity, your empathy, your ability to feel deeply, see beyond the veil, or manipulate energy is a beacon in the unseen world. It's not just angels and light beings who notice you. The dark dimensional forces notice too, and they don't need to knock. They just need you to believe you're completely safe. That's when your guard drops. That's when the whispers start. Do you ever get that feeling after a powerful meditation, like something came with you, a strange heaviness or a shift in your dreams? You tell yourself it's just integration, I'm releasing. But what if you're not releasing? What if you're absorbing? What if something attached itself to the frequency you opened and now it's feeding? You see, spiritual awakenings aren't always these blissful ascensions people post about online. Sometimes they're initiations through fire and shadow. And if you don't know how to navigate the darkness, you'll end up mistaking it for depths. This is where your discernment must evolve, because the dark doesn't always show up as evil, it shows up as fascination, charisma, even comfort. Sometimes the energy that feels the most familiar, the one you think is your protector, is the very thing draining you. Dark energies are masters of mimicry. They will pose as your higher self. They will give you partial truths, just enough to earn your trust, and once they have it, they'll distort your reality one subtle degree at a time. How? Through obsession, through dependency, through the idea that only you have this sacred knowledge. Have you ever noticed how certain teachings make you feel like you're part of an elite group? That you're more awake than others? That everyone else is asleep or low vibrational? That's not enlightenment. That's ego dressed in spiritual robes. And ego is the easiest doorway for dark dimensions to enter. They don't need to control you. They just need to influence your perception. They just need you to believe you're right and everyone else is wrong. They need you to isolate, to mistrust, to stay in your head while your body deteriorates. Because once you're disconnected from your physical anchor, you become a playground for frequencies you don't even realize are there. Here's the scariest part. Sometimes the more gifted you are, the more vulnerable you become. Because you're open, you're receptive, you're tuned in. And that means you're a perfect host for all kinds of entities. This doesn't mean you're cursed, it means you're powerful. But power without grounding is like electricity with no insulation. It burns everything it touches. So, what can you do? You must return to simplicity, to stillness, to discernment over drama. You have to cleanse not just your space, but your thoughts, your attachments, your identity. Ask yourself, am I using my gifts to serve or to feel significant? Am I genuinely connected to Source, or am I addicted to the sensation of spirituality? Am I seeking truth, or just an escape? Because here's the key. The dark path thrives on escape. It hijacks your desire to transcend pain. It tells you to vibrate higher, to avoid negativity, to only focus on love and light. But real healing doesn't avoid. It confronts. It integrates. It asks you to sit with your shadows until they no longer scare you. That's how you reclaim your power. And yes, you are chosen, but chosen for what? To suffer? No. To ascend? Not exactly. You're chosen to choose. That's the paradox. You have to decide, moment by moment, what dimension you're aligning with. You are the gatekeeper. No entity, no guru, no guide has more say over your path than you do. But you have to know yourself. Not just the light, but the murky, fragile parts. The parts that crave validation, the parts that want to feel special, because those are the parts that get hijacked the quickest. So I'll ask you again, not out of fear, but out of love. What are you really tuned to? If you feel something shifting in you right now, don't run from it. Sit with it. Let it speak. Let your soul remind you of what you already know. Because the darkness doesn't fear your light, it fears your awareness. The illusion of ascension, how escaping pain leads you deeper into it. We all want to rise, to ascend. That's the promise we're sold in every spiritual circle, every book, every meditation app, that there is this higher version of ourselves floating just beyond the veil, waiting to be unlocked. And if we just align, just raise our vibration, just clear our karma, we'll reach it. We'll leave behind the heaviness, the suffering, the confusion. We'll live in flow, synchronicity, and peace. Sounds beautiful, doesn't it? But what if I told you that this very desire to ascend is what traps so many chosen ones into descending deeper into illusion? What if ascension, as it's often presented, is just another form of spiritual escapism? A prettier mask for the same fear we've always carried, the fear of pain, the fear of being human, the fear of not being enough. You see, the dark dimensional path doesn't always come wrapped in horror. Sometimes it comes wrapped in light, in transcendence, in the idea that you can bypass your wounds by vibrating higher, that if you just meditate enough, you'll never have to feel that deep grief again, that if you align your chakras just right, your trauma will dissolve into stardust. But that's not healing, that's avoidance. And avoidance, no matter how sacred it looks on the outside, is always rooted in fear. And fear is the frequency of the dark. True ascension isn't about escaping the human experience, it's about descending fully into it. It's about sitting in the grief until it teaches you something. It's about letting the rage burn until it purifies you. It's about allowing the numbness to thaw into truth. There is no shortcut, and that's where the illusion traps us, in the promise of shortcuts. Have you ever noticed how some spiritual teachings seem to promise an end to suffering? That once you're fully awakened, you'll never feel sadness again? That once you reach enlightenment, nothing will bother you and you'll live in a perpetual state of bliss? That's not ascension, that's amnesia. Because even the masters, the real ones, the ancient ones, they grieved, they wept, they doubted, they felt the full weight of being alive, and they didn't run from it, they used it. So the question isn't, how do I get out of this suffering? The deeper question is, what is this suffering trying to reveal in me? That's the doorway. That's the path upward that first takes you downward. And that's the paradox most people aren't ready to face, because darkness isn't always the enemy. Sometimes it's the womb of your next becoming. But if you're too busy trying to transcend it, you'll never hear what it's trying to teach you. This is why so many chosen ones end up feeling lost. They awaken to their gifts but try to fast-track their way to divinity. They chase light so aggressively that they end up blind. They confuse dissociation for enlightenment. They turn their pain into a project, not a process. And in doing so, they become more fragmented than before. So I want to ask you something that no one else may have asked you before. What part of your pain are you still afraid to feel? What memory do you keep bypassing in your spiritual work? What emotion have you labeled low vibrational and pushed away instead of embracing it with love? Because until you face that, until you stop running, you're not ascending, you're spiraling, you're looping. And the dark dimensions love that, They love when chosen ones chase the light without dealing with their shadow. It makes them predictable, controllable, hungry. But you don't have to stay in that loop. You can break it by doing the one thing that scares you the most, feeling everything. No filters, no mantras, just raw, honest presence. Because that's where the real power is. Not in escaping the fire, but in walking through it and realizing it never had the power to destroy you. You were never meant to float away from your humanity. You were meant to embody your divinity through it. The pain isn't in the way of your ascension, it is the way, the awakening spiral, breaking free from the loop of false light. There comes a moment, sometimes subtle, sometimes explosive, when you realize that the path you've been walking isn't leading you where you thought it would. You've done the affirmations, you've followed the signs, you've burned the sage, charged the crystals, listened to the frequencies, and yet something remains off. Not broken, but misaligned. You feel the ache of truth beneath the layers of illusion. That's the moment the spiral begins to shift. Because awakening isn't linear. It doesn't march upward like a staircase to heaven. It spirals, it loops, it returns you back to places you thought you had already healed, already transcended. And every time you circle back, it asks, will you go deeper this time? Will you be more honest now? Or will you cling to the version of yourself that's easier to manage, easier to explain to the world? You see, false light is seductive because it promises clarity without chaos. It tells you you've arrived when you've only begun. It gives you labels, awakened, starseed, ascended, to hold on to so you don't have to face the raw vulnerability of not knowing. But real awakening, it humbles you, it strips you, it leaves you bare. And in that bareness you begin to feel what's real. One of the greatest signs that you've been tuned to a dark dimensional path is the sense of spiritual superiority disguised as insight. You start to believe you're more evolved than others. You begin to separate, to judge, to isolate your truth as the only truth. But spiritual power without humility is a trap. It builds a tower so high that when it collapses, and it always does, it leaves you shattered. To break free, we have to return to the body, to the breath, to the simple human moments that don't require mystical meaning. Washing the dishes, holding someone's hand, crying without trying to transmute it. This is where the spiral shifts, when you stop trying to escape the mundane and begin to infuse it with presence, when you stop hunting for light and start recognizing that it was always flickering inside the darkness, that the divine never left, you just weren't still enough to see it. This is the paradox of the chosen. You are chosen not to escape this world, but to anchor a new one. And to do that, you must be whole. Not just spiritually gifted, but emotionally mature. Not just intuitive, but grounded. Not just connected to the cosmos, but rooted in the soil of your own inner truth. Ask yourself now, in this moment, are you willing to let go of the identity you've built around being awakened? Are you willing to release the need to be special, to be seen, to be right? Because when you do, when you surrender even the spiritual ego, that's when your true power returns. Quietly, gently, authentically. You don't need to ascend to escape this dimension. You need to awaken within it. You don't need to protect yourself from every shadow. You need to understand them, integrate them, love them. Because every shadow is just a part of you, that once believed it was alone. You were never meant to be perfect, you were meant to be real. And that realness, that raw, unfiltered presence, is what the dark dimensions fear the most. Not your crystals, not your mantras, but your awareness. So as this spiral comes to a pause, not an end, but a sacred still point, ask yourself one final question. What if the most awakened version of you isn't the one who knows the most, but the one who feels the deepest, loves the widest, and fears nothing, not even the dark? Because in that surrender, you're no longer hunted, you're no longer haunted, you're no longer lost, you've come home. And the path, whether lit or shadowed, becomes sacred, because you walk it in truth.